Hi guys, my name is Tuomas, this is Sound of Free, and today I'm reviewing the Beach Boys studio album Car and Passions. So tough. Yeah, it's a bit tricky title. This video I'm gonna be doing sort of let's go back to the roots like the Beach Boys did sort of with this album. I don't have a script. I've done these very meticulously, these videos, for the past 6 months or so with scripts and notes and yeah. But what has happened actually with me is that I find it, each time I make a review, I find it harder and harder to actually succeed in doing that because I have to do so much preparation. I think the videos have been better with my notes and all, which I'm not dumping, but I just want to try to go back to the way I used to do these with this one and see if I'm able to do this without notes. But it's probably gonna be very rambly and all over the place, but anyway, I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. But let's go straight into it. First, a little bit of history, as usual with the album. Surf's Up marked once again in the Beach Boys story, a sort of change. Jack Riley got involved as a manager. Surf's Up was released in 1971, and this is the follow-up album for that. And Surf's Up was actually a commercial semi-success and a critically acclaimed album as well. Blondie plays, I think, on Student Demonstration Time guitar, but he's not yet involved as a member. But during 71, the Beach Boys worked closely with a South African group called The Flame or The Flames. They have sort of two titles. And what ended up happening was that The Flame, Car produced a great album for them, which I love, and I really need to make a review of that one because I think it's a great, underrated, completely under the radar, classic rock album. I really love that through and through. But anyway, that album flopped. They recorded a follow-up album as well, which has never been released. I would love to hear that. I think it was leaked last year or something like that, but I didn't hear that. But I wish that would get someday a proper release. But anyway, so the Flame sort of just dismantled. It just sort of ceased to exist. And what ended up happening was they had moved to Los Angeles, and Beach Boys sort of just poached Blondie, Chaplin and Ricky Fattar for their group. There were multiple reasons for it. They really loved their style and that energy that they brought in. Their songwriting was great, and they were both basically multi-instrumentalists, especially Ricky, who is a super talented with like, you know, you name it, he can play anything. And Blondie too is a great singer and guitarist especially. And Dennis injured his hand during this same time period and he couldn't play drums anymore, so they needed somebody to back him up on stage, live and on studio as well. So, you know, Ricky came in handy with that because he's a great drummer. They weren't just backing musicians. The Beach Boys had already a lot of touring members and backing musicians in studio too. And, you know, members like Glenn Campbell, obviously, who played on a lot of their songs on studio, and also did Brian's part really on stage before Bruce Johnston joined in. But he wasn't an official member. But Blondie and Ricky, they became official members, and they got immediately their own songs on a Beach Boys record. So that was like a big thing. During the recording of this album, Bruce Johnston also left the group, so there was that as well. And there are many stories for the reasons behind that, which I'm not gonna dive into over here. I don't really even know which is the actual factual truth. But some stories say that he left, and some stories say that he was basically kicked out. I don't know. But anyway, Car and the Passions. Well, the title is weird. Apparently it was something that they jokingly did in the early days, like in the late 50s. They had a garage group, or maybe it was just an idea, but they had Kenny and the Cadets, and Car and the Passions I think was like one of the titles that they were considering for the Beach Boys originally too, or the Pendletons. as they called themselves. So, you know, it was like one of those early sort of inside jokes. I think in the US they did not print the Beach Boys name on the album cover, which I think it should be that way, because it's so strange to have it say the Beach Boys and then Carl and the Passions and then So Tough. So it's like, what? And I think it's funny that people always talk about this album as Carl and the Passions, because the way I see it, it's supposed to be So Tough. The album's title is actually So Tough, and Carl and the Passions is like the alter ego or whatever, you know, of the group. So anyway, nobody ever talks about it So Tough. Like, the album So Tough is so cool, but it is actually So Tough. At least that's how I read it. But anyway, well, the cover art, let's talk about that a little bit. I have here one without that frame. Personally, probably like my or top 3 least favorite album covers by them, and I think even though it peaked relatively good on the charts, but it wasn't a success, you know, in sales or critically either. But I think once again the Beach Boys just dropped the ball with the artwork. I think the artwork is pretty horrible, to be honest. It does not reflect the music inside the album at all, and it is just so bland. I do dig the back cover though, with the group, and you got there Blondie, Ricky, Al, Brian behind there photoshopped. So, you know, Mike looks cool, and you know, it's just, Dennis is super cool. I love that, and I think the palm tree over here it's cool, and the titles, everything. It's really nice, and I like it that it doesn't actually say over here anywhere the Beach Boys. It just says Carl and the Passions, So Tough, and I think that's really cool. But the front cover, it just sucks, and I think if they'd have a cool group photo over here instead, like a photo like this, or maybe with instruments or something, I think it would have worked so much better, because they don't even really look like the Beach Boys, and I think that would have worked really well for them to have them over here, like, because they looked so cool, and if these guys would be on the front, I think this would have sold a lot more. But yeah, I just gotta brag a little bit. When I saw Brian do the Pet Sounds tour, I had to do the VIP thing. There's a reason why I brought in 2 albums that I wished for them to sign, and the albums being Carl and the Passions and Holland. Those albums are just, both of these albums are so important to me personally. I fell in love with these immediately when I heard them the first time, and obviously I wanted to have an album there because I knew Blondie was there, so an album where Blondie was involved actually to be signed. So, you know, yeah, maybe I could have had a Pet Sound or something to be signed too, but I didn't want to have Blondie's signature on that one. So, you know, that's one reason for it. But especially Holland. But I love this one so much as well, and I think Carl and the Passions is probably the most underrated album in their whole catalog, because Sunflower, Surf's Up, and the, you know, so-called Lo-Fi Trilogy albums, well, 2020 maybe, 2020, Carl and the Passions, not even the 85 album, because it gets a lot of love these days, but Summer in Paradise, like those, and That's Why God Made the Radio, those 4 albums are the most underrated albums in the Beach Boys catalog, because all the early albums, even though they are not talked about that much, albums prior, Summer Days and Summer Nights, or Summer Long, they are all respected in that sense that they were recorded and released in that classic period, so they get a pass immediately and they get, you know, praise for that. But especially this one, I feel, is criminally underrated, because it is so freaking great, and I just wanna go straight into the track list itself. The album starts off with You Need a Mess of Help to Stand Alone, which is a song written by, by the way, Brian and Jack Riley, lyrics by Jack. People say, the story goes, that Brian was not involved with this album at all, basically. And that's kind of bogus. I mean, sure, he was not involved in the way that he was involved in the 60s as a leading man. Nope. Brian was really busy during this time period working with his wife. His wife's sister, Diane. They had a group together called Spring, which was in Europe it was called American Spring. And they did an album. Brian produced it, wrote a few songs for it. It's a great album. I've heard it maybe once or twice, but I don't own it. And I want to so badly have it because it has some really great tunes. It's a great album. But anyway, so he was doing that at the same time, and he was more concerned about that product than actually about what Beach Boys was doing. But nonetheless, he's not all over the place over here. He doesn't have at all lead singing parts, but he's playing a lot of instruments on it, especially the tracks that he wrote. But anyway, You Need a Mess of Help to Stand Alone. Amazing album opener. I would argue it's one of the best openers for the Beach Boys ever. With Wouldn't It Be Nice and, so on, Sail on Sailor, Wild Honey. It's just a groovy, great, rootsy blues rocker, and it has that cool Brian magic all over it. And I think Carr over here starts to really find his true rock and roll voice. Obviously Carr was always a great singer. I love all of his vocals, yeah. But I think when we come to the 70s, especially the later we go in his life, and especially the 80s and 90s, his vocals just get better and better. And I think here we're gonna get a first glimpse of that sound that he really could pull off, that great... it's a rough voice, but it's not phony. It just works really well. He really pulls it off. And, some people don't like this track. I really don't know why, because it's so rockin', it's so edgy. And I think the production on this album is fantastic, because it's not... there are a few tracks that are a little bit different, the Dennis Wilson tracks, but otherwise it's very... it's just so... I mean, the drums are up front, and it's very guitar heavy, and you got just this groovy touch. I don't know, it's kind of simple, but especially the Brian songs and all this is that have a very usual Beach Boys flavor with the complex harmonies, backing vocals. And I love it how with this track they do their thing in a very different way. It is still the Beach Boys, but they just do it so differently with more edgier sound. And I wish they'd follow this style more, because it just works so well. And it's then followed with Here She Comes, which is the first track by Blondie and Ricky. And I think does Ricky sing most of the lead here, or Blondie? I don't know, I think they both sing lead. I'm not good with recognizing their voices because they sound very similar. But anyway, I love this track. It starts off with a cool bass line and the drums are up front once again, and if you think about this, it's really funny that this is like the most played song on streaming platforms from this album because of Hall & Oates track Man Eater. Hilarious. But this track really stands on itself too. I think it's a shame, kind of, that this track was released by the Beach Boys, because if this track was written and recorded by Grateful Dead or, I don't know, Neil Young or something, it would be a classic. Everybody would know it. But because it's released by the Beach Boys fans don't really like it, because it's kind of rootsy blues rocking thing, and sort of a jam track, and well, the people who like Grateful Dead or Neil Young or whatever, they don't necessarily like the Beach Boys because they think it's lame. So it sort of just flew under the radar, but it's a great song. I love it. It has so many great parts, and it's a sort of a long track for the Beach Boys. But so are a lot of the tracks on this album. And this album actually, it's also funny because a lot of people say, this album should be longer. It only has 8 tracks, so I don't like it because of that. It's not really an album. But it's like, well, but it's one of the longest albums by the Beach Boys actually, if you just check the length of it. It's like 36 minutes in Beach Boys albums, especially up to this point, had only been like 23 to 30 minute long. So it's like, it's actually quite long for the Beach Boys, and I think 35 minutes is perfect length for an album. And 8 tracks, 10 tracks, that's just. I think that's enough. You know, you don't need any more than that, and that's one of the reasons why I really love this album, because it's so concise and it's just, I don't know, it's just, it doesn't have any fluff or filler. He Come Down is, for me personally, the weakest track on the album. I do like the music a lot. It has groovy piano, which apparently Brian plays, I'm pretty sure of that. The backing vocals amazing. You know, I especially like the end part and the more silent parts and the organ, and you know, it has a cool flavor. It's basically a gospel song, but what I don't like, and usually the lyrics are not an issue for me, I don't really mind the lyrics either way, because for me, when I listen to music, the music is all I really care. I always feel that the lyrics just support the music and the melody. They're not really. I don't really care if the lyrics suck. They suck. I don't really care. That doesn't really lessen the song for me usually. But for this one, the super religious, on the nose lyrics somehow just don't work with me at all. You know, naming Jesus, Maharishi, it's like, what? I mean, Maharishi is not a freaking Jesus or whatever, or a god, he's just a guy from India. So it's like, I don't know, I just don't like it, personally, I don't know. The lyrics sort of just ruin the song for me. Even though, and you know, even though I like the song and the music, I think it's out of place. Out of all the tracks on the album, the Dennis Wilson tracks are a little bit different, yeah, too. But I think this one is the most out of place on the album. But I would have flipped that to some other track, you know, because they did cool stuff that you can hear on the Sail on Sailor box set, you know, outtakes and stuff. So, you know, there were better tracks, in my opinion, in the vaults as well during this time period. Marcella, then the last track of side 1, is a classic one, the most famous track on the album, and I love this track. I think Jack wrote the lyrics, Brian composed it, and the story behind these lyrics is crazy. I don't want to get into it, but it's kind of funny. But apparently Brian was like really liked a masseuse that he had, and one day Jack came into Brian's house and Brian was like swinging a big dildo and saying that he's gonna impress this masseuse with this toy, and Jack was like, hey, maybe it would be better to just write a song instead. And then they you know, wrote these lyrics for this track. So anyway, it's kind of crazy, but I like it. Jack's lyrics don't work for everybody. I personally always loved his lyrics, and I compare him in a way to Van Dyke Parks, because they both just had a really great way with words. And even if you just listen to, you don't really see a lot of interviews with Jack, but there's one from 2000 something. You listen to him talk and he just has a way with words, and I don't know, I always dug his lyrics, and I think he was a great collaborator for the Wilsons. But this studio version of Marcella is a double-edged sword. I really like a lot of the parts. I love that instrument, which you can hear really well at the beginning, that sort of, well, you know what it is, you know, that sort of really bright instrument. I'm not sure what that is, but that's cool. And I love the solo part with that sort of slide guitar, and I love that tag part with all those complex sort of multi-layered backing vocals, everybody singing different parts. That's just pure Brian magic all over. It's a cool tag, and I love it. But basically like the main part of this song, you know, the first section, first half or something like that, the main verses especially, I think they should have been produced in an edgier way, in a similar way as the opening track, because they somehow just, you know, the first section just should be harder rocking, really, because the song is a great rocker, and if you listen to live versions of it, you hear the full potential of the song, and they just don't. My dog, sorry, he's chewing a bone right under the camera over there, so I apologize. But you just don't get the full potential over here of the song, because somehow just the main section or main part of the song is recorded in such a sort of not mellow maybe, but sort of maybe a too laid back way. They tried to fix that with the Sail on Sailor box set, remixing that track, but it doesn't really work any better. Although I love the track, it's so cool, and I love it how it's just the opening line is just so great. Mystic maidens more than soft and sexy. It's just so cool. I don't know. It just works really well. And this one, it should have been a huge hit. Side 2, one of my favorite, all-time favorite Beach Boys album sides. It is so great. It starts off with Hold On Dear Brother, which is once again a Blondie and Ricky tune. By the way, I forgot to show this at the beginning. This is another version of the album Star Collection, the Beach Boys. It's actually, it's sort of camouflaged into looking like a greatest hits album, but it is actually Caught in the Passions. Really weird. I don't really know the story behind this, but I bumped into this a few years back. But anyway, let's go back to Hold On Dear Brother. I like this even more than Here She Comes. There's a great live version. They didn't do it live, not that I know of, ever. But Brian Wilson did it live with Nate Roos in 2015, and you can see that on that's the Brian Wilson and Friends live thing in Las Vegas, as he was promoting the No Peer Pressure album, and Nate apparently was a big fan of this track, and he wanted to perform it, so they did it, and it's super cool because Blondie and Ricky are there right next to him as well, so I just can't imagine how, you know, exciting that must have been to, you know, perform that right next to them, but also witness that in the live audience. And you know, he just really nails it. It's an amazing performance, and yeah. Anyway, but it's a cool country vibing thing with. It has that pedal steel guitar, which I think Ricky plays phenomenally. It's a really tough instrument to play, and oh, I gotta show this to you. I gotta show this to you. Wait a second. Okay, here I come. Well, about 10 years ago or something like that, I was in school. We had an assignment. It was sort of art class. I'm not a drawer or a painter. I'm more of a camera guy and filmmaker and writer. But anyway, we had to paint things and draw things and stuff like that. One of the assignments was to create an album cover, like a fictional album cover for a real song from the 70s. And for some reason I chose Hold On Dear Brother. And this is what I did. I'm not actually sure if Carry Me Home was recorded for this one or Holland. I always had that idea that it was for Holland. But anyway, I love that track. It should have been on either of these albums. But anyway, it has sort of a similar vibe. But yeah, it's just a great production, great performance, composition, everything about it. It is so freaking cool. And then the album sort of changes mood completely, and it goes into this sort of transcend. I don't know, sort of. Some people don't get this. They don't like, or they just don't like this. The last songs, or at least the Dennis Wilson songs, but I think it's very divisive because for a lot of people they are the best songs on the album, and personally for me, I love them. Not my, especially Make It Good, it's not my favorite Dennis Wilson track. I prefer his sort of Pacific Ocean blues style, but Make It Good with Daryl Dragon, to me it's phenomenal. It's the shorter one of these tracks, and the other being the last track on the album, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Very cinematic, and it does not follow a traditional song structure. It's a mood piece. It sets up a mood, sort of like a painting or a color, and that's really what I mean with the word cinematic. It's not a pop song, but it has a lot of strings, so it sort of sounds kind of, it has this sort of classical element, which Dragon brought in. Dennis, I think Dennis is playing the piano on this one and Cuddle Up on but I'm not really 100% sure. If you know better, correct me. But Dennis just really had a way with songwriting, and well, let's move forward. I really can't wait to talk with you about Cuddle Up. But anyway, I love this track, and I think it's a perfect segue into All This Is That, which is probably the greatest track by Al Jardine. And this one was written with Carl and Mike too, but Al wrote most of it. And it's the best song, best of the meditation songs that the group ever did. It took me a while to actually appreciate it properly. I think like the first time I heard it was at the 50th anniversary tour in London when they performed it live, and I thought, well, yeah, it's interesting, but didn't really get it. But by time it has actually become a very important song for me. I've actually been able to sort of what's that word? Get rid of. There's a lot of better ways for it, but sort of get rid of panic attacks with the help of this song. Not in a long time, but especially at a certain point in my life, I had this time period, I don't know, for a few years that I sort of got depressed and got a lot of anxiety. And at some point, I started to use this song as a sort of mantra for me. Each time I started to feel that anxiety building up, I started to, in my head, just think about or sort of sing the melody of this song, certain parts of it, and it soothed and calmed me down each time, and it really helped and still helps sometimes if I need sort of relaxation in a moment where I cannot lay down, or take a nap or something. I just start to sing this song in my head, and it calms me down immediately. It works really well, and I don't know. It's really hard to talk about this song because it's so personal to me, and I think for a lot of people too. And I don't personally do meditation. That's pretty much the closest thing to meditation that I do, and thanks Al, thanks everybody, because this song has helped a lot of people. I know some other people, I've read that some people do that similar thing, and somehow he was able to sort of tap into some sort of force with this one. It is a mesmerizing track. The vocals on it, Al sounds so good over here that he sounds like Mike. that's kind of funny. I thought for the longest of time that the verses were sung by Mike, especially the second one. The golden auras glow around you. I thought that was a Mike, but that's actually Al. Well, Al is just a phenomenal singer, songwriter. I don't know, this is probably my favorite song by him. So anyway, then the album ends off with Cuddle Up, which is one of Dennis Wilson's best songs in my opinion. The first time hearing this tune blew my mind. I remember sitting down and listening to this vinyl, or actually it was that one with the signatures, and when Cuddle Up started playing and you hear that piano and Dennis's voice comes in, and then you get those strings, and I was listening to the lyrics, and I was like literally, I was like 5 minutes or whatever it's long. I was like, how come I never heard this track ever anywhere? I don't know, it just blew my mind that there's really music like this that nobody knows of. And I remember my mother also heard it, and she was like, "Whoa, that was pretty phenomenal." It was like, and it's so weird. I think there's a live recording from the audience where Dennis is doing that live with basically just piano, and he's like, "Shh," and people are still talking through the song, and it's so sad. What a talent, and I wish that I could have witnessed that, and you know. And I so much wish that Dennis would have got that attention and that, you know, that recognition for his work as a songwriter, you know, when he was still living. And I still think that there's a lot to uncover, you know, when it comes to the music buying public and the music listening people and everybody. I still think that people should find Dennis Wilson's talent and his music, his work, because it's really something else. It's really unique, so soulful, and some of the best stuff really out there. So anyway, Cuddle Up, amazing way to end the album, and I love it. I love it completely. Anyway, you know, it's a great album, so underrated, in my opinion. He Come Down is to me the weakest track, but even that I still like it. And you know, 7 great tracks and 1 good track. I think that's pretty good. And I think it's so weird that this album was a flop and even a critical failure. Current Passions, Sold Off by the Beach Boys. What do you think about it? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Write down a comment and let's continue over there. And I really can't wait for the next one, Holland album, which is, I don't know, maybe my favorite Beach Boys album. I don't know, I don't want to say it's my favorite, but it's most definitely one of my favorites. But anyway, I love Car and the Passions, so underrated. Thanks for watching, see you soon, hopefully on the next one. Take care, bye bye.